Hi, Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me this podcast episode. Really appreciate it. How are you today?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you, Russell?
Yeah, I'm doing really, really well right now. Just had a last few months is really struggle, but right now getting back to myself. And yeah, super excited for this conversation today, and which is limiting belief, how is holding us back to achieve goals and things like that, and also being judged by others. So you are advocate on that, and I'd love to know before we get to the topic more about yourself. How did you become a coach and helping others?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share. So just to keep it obviously as brief as possible, I left corporate about 7 years ago. Actually, now it's about 8 years ago now, actually. And I'd created a lot of success within my corporate career, but I was really unhappy. I didn't feel like I was able to be myself in corporate. So I was kind of like molded myself into a leader that they expected me to be and not the leader that I wanted to be.
Right.
And I was working really hard. And I think basically I was just ignoring all of my feelings and just putting my head down and working. And it just got to a point where I completely burnt myself out. I developed quite a bad heart condition. And I think that that was my sign to leave
Mm.
and start a business. And I'd always wanted to start a business. And I just kind of like jumped in, not really knowing what to do.
Yeah.
And I knew that I really wanted to help people, specifically women. I really wanted to help women to be more visible. Actually, it was something that I was really good at doing when I was in corporate. I was quite good at helping people become more visible and get promotion
Right.
when I was in my corporate leadership role. And I just thought, gosh, if I can do that with corporate women, I'm sure that I can do it with entrepreneurial women. So
Mm.
it was a very slow road, which we'll talk about in a minute, due to my various limiting beliefs that really held me back at every stage, really. But it's kind of brought me to what I do now as a human design visibility coach. I use human design to show visionary women how to be authentically visible
Yeah.
without the hustle. So really not, working with our energies instead of against them. And I absolutely love my job. I work with women all around the world. And I also love coming onto podcasts like this and having conversations and sharing as well.
Yeah, that's great. You made the shift on your career and you found your calling, which is great, and you know who to help. So coming back to the topic, which is we focus on at the beginning, limiting belief holding us back. So you have worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, especially women, and you've seen they probably not to achieve what they could be achieving, and they're not hitting their best. And what is the main thing holding them back? Is that their self-doubt, or a limiting belief, or is the whole environment is not supporting them?
Mm. I think it's a bit of everything. I mean, I think environments are really important. That's one of the things that I love about human design. One of the things that human design teaches us is,
Mm.
the environments that support us, that we are able to thrive in, that light us up, that bring us joy. So I think that environments have got a significant impact on just our general well-being and mental health.
Yeah.
But the majority of women that I work with, that I speak to about this, or that will come and work with me, the biggest thing seems to be a fear of rejection.
Yeah.
And I do think that this is a biggie, actually, and I do think it's a primal fear that we all have as human beings. If you think back to back in the day when we were part of a tribe, and well, we are still part of tribes now, right? But
Yeah.
modern tribes. But back in the day of the saber-toothed tiger, we'd be in the tribe, and if we were rejected by the tribe, we wouldn't have any warmth, we wouldn't have any protection, we wouldn't have any food, and ultimately we'd die.
Yeah.
So I think it really comes back to that, that I think there's still this deep ingrained fear within all of us about being rejected by the tribe. And I think it's also a healthy fear. Like a lot of fears are, they're there to protect us, they're there to keep us safe, but
Mm.
also they can really hold us back from going out there. And, you know, the women that I work with are mostly entrepreneurial women. They know that they need to be more visible, they need to promote themselves and their business online or in person. And there are fears that are holding them back from doing that. You know, fears of being rejected, fears of
Yeah.
saying the wrong thing, fears of being judged and criticized. And, you know, again, it's quite healthy fears. You know, we sometimes have these fears, as I said before, in order to protect us and to keep us safe. But sometimes our kind of brains don't know the difference between this is genuinely a very dangerous situation and I need to follow my instinct, and, you know, this is a limiting belief and a fear and a block that's holding us back from, you know, really going out there and living an extraordinary life. So yeah, and I think back to, well, even now, I always said new level, new devil, because every time that I push myself up my comfort zone, every time that I speak to a bigger audience, or I take on, you know, a bigger client, or, you know, like when I say a bigger client, like someone that has invested more money in me, or
Yeah.
you know, every time that I kind of make a big leap and the fear is always there. But
Mm.
now I have the tools in order to manage that. And that's what I'm really passionate about helping my clients with, you know, to really learn the tools to overcome that resistance and step through. Because I believe that, you know, there's that quote, isn't there? Everything you ever wanted is at the other side of fear. And I completely agree with that.
Yeah. So like if someone is like they have the doubt, they got the limiting belief and they need some kind of help, what kind of steps you take in order to help them?
Okay. Well, I think everything starts with the self.
Hmm.
I think that if we look outside of ourselves, we're never going to really find true confidence, true self-belief, true self-love. And we're definitely not going to be able to step in the fire and stay in the fire and kind of face that fear and overcome it. So the first step is always, I am always guiding my clients to look inwards. So, you know, we've spoken about this in the past, and I know that you had an incredible human design expert on here before, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but really human design, I believe, is the first step, because what it does is it really teaches us to understand who we are
Yeah.
and recognize our inner strengths and our differences, right? I think,
Yeah.
you know, again, it's a real inbuilt fear that we don't want to be different to anyone else. We don't want to stand out, because if we're different, if we stand out, again, we might get rejected for being different, for not being part of the tribe. And I often find as well with a lot of entrepreneurial men and women, actually, that I speak to, that there's a real we can get into a real habit of comparing ourselves to other people, not even entrepreneurs. I think we all do this, right?
Hmm.
So we compare ourselves to other people, we look at what they have,
Yeah.
and then feel bad about ourselves. And very often it's a very orchestrated, heavily filtered version of that person, especially if we're looking at them on social media, right?
Yeah.
They're showing the world what they want the world to see. It might not necessarily be what's actually going on in their life. So
Mm.
this comparison game, we can really kind of fall into that. So the more that we kind of understand ourselves and accept ourselves and love ourselves, and really like stop comparing ourselves, like trying to be like someone else,
Yeah.
and actually accept who we are, then that's a huge step. I mean, that's the biggest step, really. So
Right.
we start off with human design so that my clients really understand who they are, you know, how to
Hmm.
process their energy, how to work with um everything that they have. Like there's no right or wrong, it's who we are. We're imperfect human beings, and we have superpowers, and then we have, you know, development areas, but it's all good, right?
Yeah.
And then what I often find is off the back of that, when we actually start to move forward and put ourselves out of our comfort zone and take the big leaps, that's when the resistance can really kick in. And we start to find excuses, procrastination. We look for the negative maybe instead of the positive. We decide that we're not good enough to do something, and there will always be, our brains will always try and talk us out of doing the big thing, right? Because
Yeah.
our brains want to keep us in the comfort zone. So one of the techniques that I personally have found extremely powerful through my whole journey, and something that I use with my clients quite a lot, is a technique called emotional freedom technique.
Right.
It's otherwise known, it's often referred to as EFT or tapping.
Mm.
And it's basically tapping on the meridian points on the body. It's a little bit like, probably the best way to describe it is it's acupuncture for the mind.
Okay.
And it's an incredible tool, and it's been used by therapists all over the world, especially with people that are suffering PTSD, very, very effectively. And what it does is it tackles those fears and the thoughts that those thoughts that go around and around, the anxiety, the worry, the fear. It
Yeah.
tackles those head on, and through tapping on certain parts of your body, particularly it's really the head area that you're tapping on, you can really desensitize those thoughts, so they don't necessarily go away, and I'm not sure if that's the goal, but what it does is it doesn't feel so heightened. It takes you out of that fight or flight feeling and response, and the cortisol that's flowing through your body, and it helps you to take yourself to a much calmer space, so
Mm-hmm.
that you're able to move forward with a lot more conviction and happiness, really. So I also find that that's an incredible tool. So I think really those two together, the human design, the really understanding yourself, and using the EFT as a way to kind of calm the monkey brain chatter, it definitely works for me, and it definitely works for my clients.
Yeah, that's great. So most importantly at the beginning, it's just self-awareness, right? Like where you are, who you are. That needs to be important to find out, like we mentioned, like a human design. So that's like a key aspect of it. Otherwise, like you don't know like who to be and what kind of changes you need to make in order to like being who you want to be. So when you're moving like a next level or things like that, always we get being judged by others, right? Probably your family members, probably your spouse, probably like someone's we know, a colleague or worked in the past. How do you deal with the like being judged by others?
I think what I'd mentioned before about when you can really be quietly confident about your convictions and your opinions, and you can really accept yourself,
Mhm.
you're less inclined to look for outside validation. So I mentioned before, like, when the first step when I work with my clients is to take them inwards
Yeah.
instead of looking outwards. Like, the solutions don't lie outside of ourselves, it's all within ourselves. And again, this is such a lovely human trait, right, that we all have,
Yeah.
that we can often really seek others' approval, and this external validation, where actually, if we look for ways in which we can validate ourselves internally, then really, who cares
Mm.
about what other people think? And I don't mean that you are completely like taking away all the human emotion, and you go out there and you couldn't care less about people. It's not like that at all, but it's really like, if we have a big desire to go out into this world and to create something, and it can be anything, or to do something, to really sort of push ourselves out of our comfort zone and do something that's challenging or scary or big, or like something that will really fulfill ourselves, I believe that the trick is to really start to turn our attention to what it is we're going to create instead of what it is that people will think about us as we're doing it. Because I think that, whatever we do in our lives, if we've got critical people around us, if we've got judgmental people around us, they will always be judgmental and critical of anything that we do.
Yeah.
The criticism will always be there, the judgment will always be there. So if it's going to be there, then do something that you really want to do, right?
Yeah.
Be judged for something that's incredible. And especially if you are an entrepreneur, or you're in service to someone, like if you're a coach, or you're a mentor, or you're a teacher, or you're creating communities or online programs or anything like that, like where you're actually creating a service for someone. I also think that it really helps to think about those people, to think about the people that you are actually going to help instead of the people that might criticize you along the way. If you start to think about all the lives that you're going to help, or the people that you're going to inspire, then it kind of just, that judgment and criticism kind of falls away. And I'm making it sound a lot easier than it actually is at times. And I understand that, sometimes it can be really difficult. And I think you mentioned there, family members, spouses. I think sometimes, if I look back from my business, I think I didn't really worry about being judged or criticized about complete strangers. I was actually worried about being judged and criticized by my friends, and by colleagues that I'd worked with in corporate. There was always like, my imagination would always be like, oh, if I put this post on social media, if I go and do this thing, then what are they going to be saying about me? They're going to be talking behind my back. And I think especially in the UK, I find it really interesting, actually, the culture within the UK. It can often be like, if you're too happy, or it's like you're a bit weird, right?
Yeah.
Like you've got to be a little bit down on yourself. It's like, it's about putting yourself in your place, and don't get ideas above your station, and don't be too this and don't be too that. So it's really a process of reprogramming, I guess, within ourselves, that those dynamics, and looking to do things in a different way. And that, I think eventually, you get to a place where you're that focused and that excited with your project, then it doesn't really matter what people are saying around you. If it's negative, then that's fine. There will always be negativity, always.
Yeah.
So it's like, how am I going to deal with that?
Yes, totally makes sense. That I live my life like this way as well. Like, it's always going to be. But thing is, like, a lot of people don't know how to get out of it, and you sharing this is really helped. So Rebecca, we're coming to the end of this podcast. It's been a pleasure having you in the show, and a great conversation we had. So those who are listening, if anyone wants to learn more about your program, learn more about you, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, so probably the best way to find me is on my website, which is abigailrebecca.com. Or if you just Google Abigail Rebecca or the Visibility Goddess, you'll be able to find me straight away. There's some really amazing resources actually on my website. There's lots of free training. If you go over to my blog section, you'll see there's lots of videos and there's lots of blogs, on different subjects that will be able to help you. And heavily, obviously, lots and lots of information about human design on there. And if you wanted to find out more about your human design, or if you wanted to be more visible, there's lots of resources on there and ways of working with me. And I also have a free book that you can download, and it really is like, it's kind of, I've touched on it very slightly, but it's like the 7 steps that I use when I first work with clients, in order for them to, really come back to self-love and self-acceptance and confidence. So you can't actually find it on my website, but if you go to abigailrebecca.com and then do a IFW, and that's all lowercase, and I can send you the link as well, so you can display it underneath. Then you'll be able to download my free book as well, which I think will really help.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. So we are coming to the end of this podcast, Rebecca. I wish you best of luck with your business, your personal life, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
having me.
You're most welcome. That's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. I hope you go enjoy the episode and got some value from it. And if anyone is interested to learn more about Abigail and get some books, I'm gonna leave the link below, and also you can get checked out on her website as well. Until then, I'll talk to you in the next episode. Take care.